Thank you for listening. I'm very excited to talk with you and hear what your questions and comments. I think some people have had a chance to read parts of the book, others not. So if you click on the participants icon, you should have a raised hand icon. And Cameron.
I was actually just applauding, not raising my hand, but thank you.
Oh, that was an applause. I get a little applause. Okay, so Marianne, I see Marianne.
There we go.
Well, first of all, I loved the book, right? I read it all the way through, and a couple of pages throughout I read and reread to make sure I understood it. I had two questions, though, that I didn't, and you kind of began to talk about it, Marva, but his concept of God, it kept switching. I kept, first it's the universe and the ocean and plants and the totality that you even stated in the book that it was not a human image. But then in other parts, he refers to it more like we would talk about God today as a human, you know, in that human image. So I kind of don't fully understand his concept of God. It clearly was totally throughout the book, but it was confusing to me, switching back and forth.
That's a great question. It's such an immense, it's such an immense topic, period. God, it's an immense topic. For Hugo, is a lifelong immense topic. And he uses the term God, Dieu, in French, which is the standard way to say God in a Judeo-Christian tradition in France. But at the same time, I mean, at other times he used other terms that really conjure up ideas of Hindu or Buddhist thought about a divine force that lives in everything in the world. And so I think that he had just an incredible, I think he had a changing conception. I think he never came, I said he concluded his narrative poem, God, with that quote. Well, it's an unfinished work. It's the last line in the poem, but I didn't want to spend a lot of time explaining that. So it's God, his poem called God, is an unfinished work. And I think that's the bottom line. It's still, who knows? I mean, if we knew, we wouldn't be wondering all the time. Did you have another question, or is there someone else?
Well, yeah, the other one, first of all, I mean, you really are amazing to me. That book and your ability, everything that you did, all the homework that you did, all the research that you did, even to that appendix A, was just incredible, just incredible. Okay, so the second question was around Gavroche. So I only got, to be honest, I only got halfway through Les Misérables, the book, his book, okay?
Right.
So maybe I missed this, this focus of Gavroche because I only know him basically through the movie, which was minimal.
Yes.
Apparently he felt he represented poverty, poor.
Gavroche is one of the best parts of the novel. And so it's like I say to people, if you get stuck on the Waterloo section, feel free to skip it. I give you my power to skip it. I didn't, and it stopped me for years. But don't miss the last chapter of that section because it's key. But skip ahead to the section where Gavroche is introduced. Yes, he's iconic in France. He represents the abandoned children. His parents, in effect, abandoned him and just left him out. He's a street urchin, and he's incredibly generous to anyone he's in terrible shape. He has nothing, but he has an incredible sense of humor. He's one of the comic relief parts of the book, and he is incredibly generous to everyone.
Innocence and generosity.
Innocence and generosity. John chimes in from the kitchen. Hi.
Hey, Barbara, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks for coming.
Well, thanks for doing this. It was wonderful. It was really nice. It was lovely to hear. I was very interested. And I look forward to reading your book, which I've not done yet. Having read Les Mis, do you have recommendations for where else to go in Hugo's vast corpus? I mean, do you have other books that you like as well as that?
Yes. So you're saying you've read Les Misérables, right? That, I mean, I understood you correctly.
And I know it needs to be read and reread.
No, that's okay. Well, it depends what you like. So if you like history and you want to follow this conscience question, then 93, which is set after the French Revolution, is a remarkable novel. It's his last novel. If you like symbolism and vocabulary and poetry and prose, read, I don't know how it's translated, but in French is what is called in English, Toilers of the Sea, which is a gift to the people of Guernsey, set in the Channel Islands. It's an amazing book. I get a big kick out of his Gothic novel he wrote when he was like a teenager in his 20s called Han, H-A-N, of Iceland. I don't know that that's available in English, but that's just a hoot. And of course, Notre Dame de Paris, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, if you like romanticism. If romanticism is over the top for you, then this will be over the top. But I adored it. It's what got me interested in Hugo in the first place.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks for asking that.
We've got a question in chat. Could you comment on how you were able to organize your thoughts and approach to writing about such an epic story?
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a really good question. Well, it took me about a year and a half to change my writing voice from academic voice. Well, I didn't realize I had such an academic voice to the voice that you have in the book, which I hope is appealing to people who are not academics. And in that long process, I changed many times, not just how the book would be organized. And in the end, I think inspired, in part, it's a book I'd recommend, inspired by Andy Kaufman's Give War and Peace a Chance. I organized it according to the topics, the way you see it. And I've just been reading Hugo and working on the Victor Hugo on Things That Matter a decade ago really helped solidify in my mind a lot of the my basic understanding of Hugo. Taking lots of notes and then sorting them into where I thought they fit is, I guess, the best way to answer how I organized it.
Marva, that was just wonderful, and I adored the book. I read it all in one day just because. And my question has to do with another major theme, both in Hugo's book and in your book, which is forgiveness. And in both in Hugo's book and in your book, forgiveness is dealt with on an individual level. So one person is moved to forgive another person who has wronged them in some way. These days we know in the world a great deal of wrong is being perpetrated on lots of people by individuals with immense power all over the world. How can forgiveness, is there any meaning to forgiveness on a large scale like that, or does it always have to be one-on-one when there is such terrible misery inflicted on so many individuals? Is forgiveness even possible?
Well, Hugo thought it was. All right, so I do talk in this chapter on why forgive. I talk about his work for clemency. So the Commune Revolution was a civil war in the 1871, I guess it was, and many of the communards were killed by the National Guard, by the government's troops, and many who weren't killed fled. And they were shipped off to like Devil's Island kinds of islands. And Hugo argued from then, and he offered asylum. That's the allusion I made in my talk. He was in Brussels for family business at the time, part of the time of this. And he offered for any of the communard revolutionaries, if they wanted to come to Brussels, they could come to his house as though they were going to a church and have asylum. So he's offering it to the whole group of people. And he lobbied into the 1880s and eventually won to to have official clemency given to those people. So the government, forgave all of those people for fighting against them 10 years earlier. So his thinking and the understanding that I came to much more deeply in working on this book is that the people who benefit the most from forgiving are the people who are offering the forgiveness. And so how you convince, to respond more directly to your question, how you convince people who are doing horrific things to other people, to stop. I was also struck, when you think about horrific, I was struck, and I think I mentioned it in the chapter, the number of members of the church, the Black church in South Carolina, who literally forgave the shooter after he came in and killed all those people. So some people are able to forgive today in mega ways. But how, and so how you make that happen is a really good question. Can't answer that one all the way.
Marva, it's nice.
Hi, Karen. Good to see you. Thanks for coming.
Not quite in person, but online.
It's nice.
Thank you so much. And I have not yet read the book, but I plan to soon, and I look forward to it. But you mentioned right away as you started, you thanked your students. And I wanted to get a sense of how they may have informed the book, or if you collaborated with students, or what kind of role did they play?
Well, both. So actually, as I was working on the book, I wanted it to include more of my students' voices initially. It turned out that developmental editors and such like didn't think that would be a way to sell the book, or that was an appropriate thing to do. But my students all agreed, and I've taught this Les Misérables to 5 different classes of going on 150 students. And I asked them, do you mind, I'm writing this book, do you mind, will you agree that I could quote you? And they all agreed that I could quote them. In the end, I quote only a couple of them, the ones who had ideas that I would never have come to on my own in terms of Hugo's symbolism. So the conversations, writing is a kind of teaching, and teaching is a kind of learning. So I teach only through discussion. I don't lecture, and it's a back and forth, and I go in to see how much I can learn from the students. So they just deepened and broadened and my thought, and questioned me, and made me go at things again, made me change my mind. And then I did collaborate with Katie and Abby and Emily very one-on-one. Abby gave me lots of feedback on the early drafts, and Nina as well. So I've had a few students that actually gave me feedback as on the writing process, did some of the research around the musical, that kind of thing. That was wonderful working with them.
This was a wonderful, wonderful book to read. Really enjoyed it.
Good.
A lot out of it. And it kept bringing back memories of the, encouraging is the prettiest way to put it, me to read Les Misérables years ago. And then I want to go back and reread it now that I have read this book, because in the non-academician's voice here, you've really stirred up some thoughts that I'd like to re-examine in reading the original again.
Thank you.
I have a recommendation for your next book, which is to explain what's going on with the Battle of Waterloo. I almost gave up.
I will turn you to Claire. Claire is probably out here in the gang somewhere. Claire, in reading the book, she said she went and she studied Waterloo so she could understand exactly what was happening, and looked up all kinds of things online. So it's been a few years, but she may, I encouraged her like you. And no, I must admit that Waterloo is still hard. The section is amazing because he's describing the Battle of Waterloo with many details. He finished the novel with, the last thing he wrote in the novel was that section on Waterloo, and he went to the battlefield to write it. So he's looking at the battlefield. And so that's intriguing to me. But I don't know whether it's a metaphor. The message through that whole Waterloo section, though, is about, it's about lots of things, but one of the major themes is what is pushing the world? Are we predestined? Is it some kind of fate that's just jumping in, you know, willy-nilly? Or is it providence? Is it God as providence? Is it God's will? And it's very interesting to read through, as my students and I did some semesters, read through looking very carefully at those sections to see, you know, and it's like Marianne's question about God. What is God? Well, what is driving the world? I mean, we really don't know. And I think that comes across pretty clearly in that Waterloo section. So
Well, I think I'll take your lead and go back and reread Waterloo, just thinking of that. That's very helpful and I appreciate it.
yeah, thank you.
Congratulations on a great job. This is a really fine book.
Thank you, Doug. Good to see you, Janet.
Good to see you.
We both totally enjoyed it.
Thank you. That's wonderful.
Hi, Marva.
Hi, Janet.
You're hiding there somewhere. And hi, everyone. I loved your book, Marva. I looked forward so much to reading it after talking about it so often with you at various points. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot of things I didn't know. And I just have a comment and then a question. When I read it, it just, as you said it yourself in your own opening remarks, there were so many things that resonated with our day, our moment today, you know, about particularly the inhumanity of bad laws, you know, and just how they affect people's lives. And we see that, and I really, really appreciated that and was stunned actually by how contemporary, you know, how relevant it is to our current moment. And then of course, I just congratulate you on attacking the religious question, because it's a hard one to.
Very hard. It's the hardest chapter to write. I forgot to say that, Marianne. Thanks, Jen.
And it's important, and no one really talks about that much about it, you know. So I congratulate you for tackling that. And I just thought it was so interesting. I don't know why, this isn't really my question, but I don't know why Hugo wasn't baptized. Was it his parents didn't want him to be baptized? Because he was not baptized, and then at the end of his life, he chose not to have a priest or any religious ceremony. He had a completely civil burial, which was a big scandal in France in 1885. And so I just was curious, at both ends of his life, he had, one was of his choosing and one was not of his choosing. He didn't have the institution of the church present, so that was the Catholic Church. So that was interesting to me. And then I just wondered if you knew if these reflections by Hugo about God, about the nature of God, were these more you know, very sort of private musings that he shared with his family, or did you get the sense that he might have had any kindred spirits who were his contemporaries who kind of also followed him, that he had companionship in that you know, sort of very unusual, in his personal way of approaching the question of belief in religion and the presence of God in the world?
That's a fantastic question, and it has, I think, you know, 2 or 3 threads out from it in answer. Yes, there were some other people who inspired him, and I don't know that anybody followed him, but there were some contemporaries. That is not a path I went down. I wanted to finish the book one day, and I just didn't. I mean, it's something for me to learn more about, because I do think that he spent most of his time, especially while in exile, those 19 years, with lots of, you know, all that time, all that nature as a romantic around him, somebody with a romantic sensibility. So I do want to not forget to mention that you will see a number of these threads of this other non-Catholic, non-Christian conception of God in his visionary poetry. The poetry that he wrote in some of Les Contemplations, La Légende des Siècles, Dieu, The End of Satan, La Fin de Satan. And my colleague through Swan Isle Press, Rick Skinner, has, for those of you who don't read French, done these beautiful books of translating brilliantly excerpts from God and the End of Satan, which has a story about the angel Liberty, the daughter of Satan, the angel Liberty. There, he has two books, one illustrated really remarkably, and a short book, and then a really rich big one with God and the End of Satan, with long excerpts from these poems that you can read in English. And my colleague that I met through Rick, Suman Venkatesh, is coming out this coming year with a book called, in French and then in English, Victor Hugo and Hindu Philosophy. And as a Hindu, she has an understanding that I sadly will never have, and has looked at that visionary poetry and seen all kinds of parallels with Hindu aspects of Hindu philosophy and religion. So yeah, so you also see it in his poetry. It's not just in his journal notes. And if you read Les Misérables with an awareness of basic understanding, which is all I have from my world religions class in college, and a little bit of more reading, a little bit of awareness of Hindu thought and Buddhist thought, you will see it in there, along with the Christian and allusions to Jesus Christ that you see in Les Misérables.
How are you?
Hi, Jamie. Good to see you. Hi.
Hello to you, John, also, and to everyone. Marcy and I are loving your book. We admire your writing so much.
Thank you.
Congratulations. So in kind of pursuing the expressing love through political and social activism, you've touched on that in your introduction, and you've spoken more about it today, but to resist Napoleon Bonaparte's rule, could you just talk, first of all, how did he avoid the bounty on his head? And also other specifics about what forms of resistance did his actions take in fighting against Bonaparte's?
That's another book. So I'll try to be brief. In the moment, so Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, who was known as the Napoleon's nephew, was elected president of France. And in his last year, on December the night into December 2nd, he said, I dissolve the legislature. I am president for life. That's the coup d'etat in 1851. Many of the legislators, and Hugo was one at that time, said, no, we can't do that. I mean, you can't do that. So one thing Hugo did in the moment was write a poster. He was very, very, very famous for most all of his life, certainly in that period, and signed it big Victor Hugo. And he called upon the military to support the Republic, which is a democracy, to support it and to not follow the president. That didn't work. He encouraged people on the barricades, and he was saved. There was a bounty on his head, and he wasn't the only one. For a few days, like 3 or 4 days, the legislators met in secret in different places around Paris, and but they weren't getting anywhere. The people weren't rising up, just as they don't rise up in 1832 in the novel. And he was going to be imprisoned, or if they could have killed him, they probably, I mean, there was a price on his head, dead or alive. So he was saved from that by the friend, lover, and muse that I alluded to before, Juliette Drouet, who got her friends to help him get a passport or an identity card in another name, and they snuck him out of Paris to Brussels. And then he was in exile, and then his wife and family, you know, they had to sell their belongings, and they followed him eventually, and so did Juliet. So what did he, and then in exile, he wrote this, he said, just because, he said in a speech before the coup d'etat, he said, just because we've had Napoleon the Great, do we have to have the little Napoleon le Petit, the petit one? And they got big roars of laughter, like he often did in his speeches. And he wrote a pamphlet, which they tried to smuggle, to a certain extent, smuggled into France, called Napoleon le Petit, Napoleon the Little. He also wrote, but it wasn't published till post-exile, his side of all that happened in 1851-52, called Story or History of a Crime, Histoire d'un Crime. And then he wrote this scathing book of poetry called, it's hard to translate into English, called Les Châtiments, the chastisements, the punishments. And it's, I felt like when I don't understand the history that well of this period, but I could see flames coming off the page. Hugo is so righteously angry about what Bonaparte did. And that was very popular. I mean, that wasn't accepted in France, but it also was smuggled in. All of this, he did all that he wrote in the first like 4 years in exile, I'd say. So yeah, he was, and they actually did have police. They were opening his mail. People were spying on him while he was in the Channel Islands and before the general amnesty, certainly.
Thank you so much. You're brilliant. Love you, and we'll talk to you soon, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Here we go.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So good. Congratulations. Boy, you're amazing.
Thank you.
Your book is absolutely beautiful. Quick question. I think I know the answer, but looking back, when you and your cute mom, which is making me cry here.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry about that.
We go way back. We go way back in you, Mark and Jamie.
But when you watched Les Mis together and you flipped for it, was that, do you consider that a benchmark for yourself and how you look at life and how you live your life?
That's a really good question. It was the beginning, I think. I don't think it wasn't an immediate moment, but it opened a new path, definitely.
Oh, new path.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you. Good question.
Thank you.
Never thought about it that way.
Yeah. Say hi to John.
He will. He's there somewhere, I think. There he is. He's waving down there.
Hey, John.
On my screen, anyway.
Talk to you soon, Marva. Love you.
Love you. Thanks for coming in from Salt Lake.
Oh, wouldn't miss it.
Question in chat. Do you think Hugo had an easier time loving the masses in the abstract than he did loving well the women in his life?
So I think Hugo loved the women in his life very well. And I say that because of how he treated them and how he stuck by them. Hugo married his sweetheart, his childhood sweetheart, Adele, when they were, I think he was 19, she was 17, 18, 19, like that. And they rapidly had 5 children. The first one died as an infant. They had 4 children, 2 years apart. And Hugo was very busy being famous. And Adele fell in love with his best friend. His best friend fell in love with her. She responded to it. And as Victor Hugo is figuring this out, he's going to rehearsals of his plays, and he falls in love with the woman said to have the most beautiful shoulders in Paris, who was an actress, and Juliette Drouet. And I think he felt from reading Juliette's letters to him and his letters to her, and the fact that they were friends, lovers, friends for 50 years until she died about 2 years before he did. In a period where artists and famous and well-to-do people had love affairs all over the place, including women. Jourson, who's a woman writer, she was married, maybe divorced, I'm not sure, I don't know her life, but she had 2 children from her marriage. She had affairs with Chopin and Alfred de Vigny. This was really common in France at the period. And what was different about Hugo is how he kept his affection. He stayed affectionate and loving and supportive to Adele, to Juliette, to Leonie, the married woman that he took up with around the time his daughter drowned, and who was younger than he, until they were cut apart by exile. So mostly, I think, I believe that he was remarkably faithful and incredibly loving to these women in his life.
Just a question about, we know how much you enjoy the theater and the film adaptations, the recent ones. and you've obviously used them as a resource. Could you tell us, in your expert opinion, how much they were faithful, why you enjoyed them, knowing the book so well, and did they miss anything? Is there anything that they could have included in that masterwork? It's hard to adapt, but I know you know all three very well. I have other questions. One more question too after this.
When you say all three, you mean the stage musical, the movie musical, and the novel?
That's correct.
Those three. What bothered me, two things bothered me a lot the first time I saw Les Mis on Broadway, having read the novel and studied the novel. The Christian images, symbolisms, the crucifixes and things that I found out were due to the original John Caird's. He said, this is a Christian story. I've quote from the John Caird working with Trevor Nunn for the original London production of Les Mis, saw it as a Christian story, which explains why you have so much Christian imagery in the musical. And so because I read the book as broader, the Christian imagery is there, but it's broader and it feels like it's being hammered on me. And as I was watching Les Mis the first time, Javert's song Stars, it just completely carried me away. It's one of my favorites. They're all my favorites. It's one of my top favorites. And I went, why did they give such a beautiful song to such a messed up person as Inspector Javert? In the end, I've gotten used to that. That doesn't bother me anymore. And what I wish they could put in, but it is so subtle in the book, my students can attest to this, is the picture that I showed you on the Is Change Possible. After Valjean meets the bishop, and he is not on the road to redemption at all. He is stunned, he is confused, he is angry, he is messed up. And he's like wandering the road, and he sits down and he doesn't know where he is. He can't think straight. And this little chimney sweep comes by and he's tossing his coin and the coin drops, and Valjean doesn't even realize that he's put his foot down on it. Just kind of automatically puts the foot down. And it's that scene is, it starts a French movie with Belmondo called Les Misérables. I haven't seen it in years, but that's set during World War II. That has this real, if you haven't seen that, Richard, you love it. It's a French film, but it starts with that scene because French people know that scene, that Valjean realizes after Petit Gervais has gone away, he realizes what he's done. And it's in that moment, it's what Marcy was asking, is this a turning point in his life? That was the turning point in his life, when he realized what the bishop had done for him. And I don't know how you would stage that. You might be able to do it in a film where you can get maybe up close and, but because it's so subtle and tiny. So that's a loss to the story, because I think that's a much more realistic way to explain Valjean's redemption. It's not an easy thing. It's not like a magic touch by the bishop. But otherwise, I think it picks up the heart of the story, and it's as faithful as it can be in 2.5, 3 hours. Sorry, I cut you off.
And certainly a theatrical event. I wonder, just quick question. I know some authors have favorite places for people to purchase your book. You can do it on Amazon. Do you have a favorite place or two my
favorite place would be whatever independent bookstore you have, if you have an independent bookstore wherever you live. So there's some people here from Charlottesville. New Dominion Bookstore has been very supportive of me. But it's in or it can be ordered from any bookstore. Barnes & Noble has it. It's on Amazon. UVA's bookstore here has it. And or you can buy it directly from the University of Chicago Press. So it's easy to get. It's a real book. It's out there.
Thanks, Barbara.
I'm just going to make a quick comment because I assume our mic is still on.
Yes.
I love the book, and I'll just pick one thing. It's how relevant it is to today. You're linking that masterwork with events today, and it's like water in the desert, for things have always been impossible. And if he held up that flag and did what he could, it is a real support and impetus for us all.
Thanks, Jude. I'm glad you find it touching. I would add to what you said. Hugo did what he could. Yes, he did what he could. He did more than I feel like I'm doing. What I think he did best is inspire. You know, I think so. You know, sometimes people say, "Well, why didn't Hugo do more for, you know, for this or that?" And he didn't. He wasn't a policymaker, but he was the guy who inspired the policymakers to do things better. So that's one goal I have for the book. I hope it will touch other people and that, you know, they'll say, well, what can I do in my life that will make the world a better place? What else can I do besides what I'm already doing?
Marva, this is Joe in Sherwood. And
yeah, hi.
We're going to have to leave, but we couldn't leave without, first of all, congratulating you on a marvelous achievement and toasting you to every success. May the future be ever as bright as it is.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Great to see you.
And to John, too.
Thanks for coming.
You're welcome.
Marva, I'm wondering, how did you originally became interested in Victor Hugo?
How did I originally become interested?
Yeah,
I picked up what's called in English The Hunchback of Notre Dame when I was about 13. And I absolutely fell in love with it. I fell in love with it so much that the very first place I went, the first time I went to Paris, was the Notre Dame Cathedral. And I'm not Catholic, and I love cathedrals, but I went there to see where Quasimodo lived, because to me it was like a real person, dating from that, you know, relatively young age of reading that novel. I was just so struck by the beauty of his language and by his ability to take people that society just looks so down on, like Esmeralda the gypsy and Quasimodo, the hunchback, who is so incredibly deformed and ugly and angry, of course, and scary, and show their heart and show the humanity of these people. And so that's what I loved. And what I appreciate about the book now that I don't think I was able to appreciate then is how that Hugo called it Notre Dame de Paris, because the cathedral is a character in the novel, and how he brings, I did gut level get the cathedral was a character because I felt like I had to go visit the cathedral, but now I understand better how he does that, so that's what got me started. And then I had a professor when I was doing my master's degree who had done her dissertation on one of Hugo's plays, and she taught courses on Hugo, and I ended up working on doing my master's thesis on the theme of love in Victor Hugo's works, and then sort of let him go, you know, got pulled in other directions, and then thanks to Janet Horn, who asked the question earlier, who said, yes, you can teach a course on Victor Hugo. He wasn't just a literary person, he was a historical figure, and he's a graphic artist, as you saw as well. And when I went to look at him as an adult, I realized what a genius he was and how rich his work was. So that's sort of my quick trajectory of what brought me to this book.
Just got your book. I was glad to see you included so much of his artwork. As you know, I went to Paris to study Victor Hugo's literary works and ended up falling in love with his artwork and his, I guess you call it, political outlook on things about the opposition to the death penalty, prison reform, rights for women and children, equal justice. But Wanda took the book away from me. I got to glance at the artwork, and that's about it. But congratulations on your book. We're going to enjoy it, and we wish you well. And hello to everybody else. Bye
Thank
now.
you for zooming in. Wanda and Virgil and some other folks who are here took my Victor Hugo's Paris course. What, a year and a half ago? Is that all it's been? Yeah, it's a wonderful experience, wonderful people. John's coming through the door.
Thank Todd for me.
Oh, John says thank you.
I do not have a clue how to operate this thing. So I can't see anybody or.
John says thank you, Todd. Poor John's out there in the wasteland. I can talk about Victor Hugo till the cows come home if you give me a chance. Any more questions or comments?
I just wanted to say thank you so much. This has been such a delightful hour listening to this amazing work that have and to benefit from your lifelong study of this genius and to see how it is so applicable to, it truly is timeless and certainly applicable to our lives today. And so I just wanted to say thank you and congratulations, Marva.
Thank you, LaVey. Thanks for all your help.
That's great to see you at last. It's been wonderful listening to what you've had to say about your book, and we hope to have some arrive in Guernsey soon from David Radis. I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
That's
exciting. I'm going to ask you a question now, which is really just, I mean, I find myself often thinking, if only Victor Hugo were alive today, couldn't he write a letter about this, or wouldn't he say something about that and be on the telly and he'd got plenty to say about all sorts of things.
Good point.
But what do you think he choose to do? To be a poet or a novelist, he'd want to make films, or do you think he'd want to be a politician? What might he want to do?
So you froze for a moment. So is your question, what would he choose to do today to get his message out or to engage with the world?
I mean, do you think he'd he'd make
poetry,
films?
TV?
Yeah.
Hugo loved new inventions and progress. And so, yeah, I mean, maybe film, because film is so
That's
contemporary.
what I think.
You know, people could make enough money, as you know so well, as a poet in 1854, 55 to buy a 4-story house, a magnificent house in St. Peter, Port Guernsey, as a poet from one book of poetry. Not today, probably. And so, I mean, poetry is not as well read or as much read or as much engaged with maybe as film across across the spectrum of people. So that's an interesting question. I love that question. What would he would be really busy saying lots of things. I think he would be giving speeches. He liked speeches and writing too. I mean, he was a writer, right?
I think he'd get into trouble.
You think he'd get into trouble?
He would have learned guitar.
For certain. I think he'd get into trouble. Whatever he chose to do, there'd be trouble.
Yeah, there would be. There would be.
He would have learned guitar. He would have become a rock star.
Yeah, he was a rock star. Yeah, that's it. Now it's a great question. I have to think about that more. Jenny and Bruce.
Hi, Marva.
Hi.
Wanted to let you know that we enjoyed the book. We knew very little about, almost nothing, about Victor Hugo, the man.
Yes, it's normal.
Bruce and I like to read out loud as we're driving up and down to our kids' house in Philadelphia, and we just did that. So it's fresh in our mind. Enjoyed it a lot, all the big issues and the way you relate them to today's issue, and just mercy in particular, I found very relevant.
Yes.
So thank you very much for giving us more motivation to add conscience to our everyday lives.
Well, thank you. Thanks for saying that.
Marv, I also wanted to ask you, in the book you talked a lot about the musical versions, but you didn't mention the earlier dramatic versions. And my introduction to Les Misérables was the 1978 version, where I loved Anthony Perkins as Javert. I'm wondering how you think the earlier versions compare to the musicals in terms of being true to the book.
Oh, there's such a range. You know, there are like over 60 film versions of Les Misérables around the world. And in the US, and well, I think more in France, I think, to me, France and the US, they cross in my head. The most faithful is one that you can't see. It's a silent French film, unless you go to Paris. It's like, how long is it? About 10 hours. They do it like the ring cycle. And sometimes in theaters, you go for one sitting, maybe two days in a row, or you go in the afternoon, go have dinner and come back and watch the rest of it. Because it's so long, it's very detailed. It's a long, massive novel. There is a the 1937 French film starring Harry Bauer is available with the English subtitles. That I think is the best available dramatic, not musical. Too often, I think, too often screenwriters, I'm thinking of the Liam Neeson version where Liam Neeson plays Valjean very well, but the screenwriters, and there's a French version with Depardieu, and this is worth seeing though, John Malkovich playing Javert, because he's a fluent French speaker, a native French speaker. It's worth watching for their performances, but it's better not to watch them before you read the novel, because the screenwriters, in my opinion, think they know better than Victor Hugo. So they write things in that are just not in the novel that warp the novel. And in both those are the two most egregious that I've seen that just really mess things up. So no matter how good the acting is or the costuming or whatever, I latched onto the musical because it's so, in my life, it was certainly 6, 7, 8 years ago when I started teaching the courses. It was really far and away the most pervasive version. Many of my students came to take the Les Misérables course or the university seminar because I'd say, why did you choose to take this course? I love the musical. Quote, I love the musical, or my parents love the musical and I've listened to it since I was 5 and I love it too. So it's this generational thing happening. And that was a wonderful way to teach the course, because they came in knowing the musical and then fell in love with the novel, found the novel much richer, of course, because you have 1,400 or 12 to 1,400 pages versus 2.5 to 3 hours. But the more I did that, the more I realized that I think that Schoenberg and Boublil's musical really captures the heart of the novel, even though it can't give us all the details and it can't explore everything at a level of finesse that Hugo can in that kind of novel. So that was really why I started with the musical. Once I got to talk to Hugh Jackman, who is so generous and intelligent and thoughtful, and who reached out to Claude Michel Schoenberg, Alain Boublil, and Tom Hooper for me, and they all agreed to talk. And then I talked to some other people as well. It was just very enriching, and there's not that cultural excitement around any of the non-musical movies. So that's why I did it that way. But there are definitely, you can get into much more detail when you're not taking up your time singing these amazing songs that Schoenberg wrote. David.
Marva.
Hi.
Hi. It was absolutely inspiring. This talk you gave this afternoon, you can tell from everyone who participated, so engaged by what you had to share with all of us today. And of course, the book itself just is truly inspiring, as are you. For me, working with you on this book was one of the great pleasures, rewards of my work at Swan Owl Press. But I was thinking, and I'm so glad that you shared some of the book with us in terms of some of the images that are in the book, and also some of the excerpts. And I just wanted to share, there's so much in this book that should be shared. But if I may I just read a paragraph that I think,
please.
And it's in the chapter, Finding Strength to Carry On. And I think in the present moment, and a number of people have mentioned this, you have, how relevant Hugo's work is, and it's certainly relevant now. And here's a paragraph that there are so many, but if I may read this one. Love, fortified by conscience, prompts the resolve and perseverance that bring us through suffering to success. Whether we love another person or care for those less well off than ourselves, feeling such outward facing commitment gives us meaningful goals, and increases our resilience. Beyond supplying us with a mission and courage, however, love is key to our humanity. In our humanity, Hugo argues, is indomitable and imperishable. We all have within us inalienable humanity, inadmissible human feeling. That's that splendid phenomenon, perhaps the finest of all our inner marvels. Love connects us together, and love invites us to accept our own and others' failings. Reinforced by conscience, love pushes us to do the best we can despite our shortcomings. So that theme that is so much a part of Hugo's work, love, conscience, that vision that you explore so beautifully in this book. And one of those other themes that maybe we need to explore further is the law and justice, and sometimes the paradox that Hugo also explores in terms of law and justice, and how they may conflict, and of course the character of Javert, Valjean. There's just so much in the novel itself, and of course, as Boublil and Schoenberg explored in the musical so beautifully as well. We should thank them for this wonderful foreword in the book, and the praise you've already received. So I wanted to kind of stand back and let others speak, but I definitely wanted to at least let you know how meaningful this afternoon has been, being with you virtually. And I hope that there will be more opportunities in future where we can all be together and explore Hugo's work and your work more in person.
Thank you, David.
Say hello to John for me too, please.
I will. He's still there somewhere. He's yelling from the other room. He can hear your voice.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think that Hugo's understanding and battle about justice, what's morally right versus what is legal, is really special. It's not something that we talk about, I think, as much as we should. And people pass laws. If you haven't read the book, people pass laws. What our conscience, our sense of what's morally right comes from God, Hugo argues. And so when people say, well, that's the law, that's it, that's all, Hugo's saying not necessarily. And, obviously Bryan Stevenson is making the same case. And anybody involved with all the Innocence projects, and they're just so there's so many laws today that that people who haven't paid their court fines can't get their driver's license back, or that people who paid for their crimes can't vote, or I can go on and on and on. Hugo's really opened my eyes, and I see it all the time, and I don't see a lot of op-eds about it. I don't see a lot of people talking about it, which I don't understand, because maybe it's a cultural thing. So I'm kind of happy that you brought that up in particular.
Going back to what you were saying about the popularity of the musical, how immensely popular it is. I don't know if you know this, but a couple of years ago, the BBC did, well, you'll know about the adaptation that the BBC did. And because we were really looking forward to it, and it was great. And the first episode came on and we watched it. It was wonderful. And then there was a Twitter storm. Now I'm not on Twitter, but I had a look at what was going on. And the Twitter storm was because a huge number of people were extremely indignant. They'd watched the first episode, and where were the songs? That was all they wanted to know. Why had they left out the songs? So there you go.
Well, I find it a bit ironic. So one of my colleagues who joined me in a discussion. So when that came to American public television, which was a year and a bit ago, we got together in the public library, about, I don't know how many, 20 of us, and talked and discussed it week by week. And so I was watching it very carefully to lead that discussion, and I was reading the helpful information that the BBC or NPR was providing about, and they did give some very helpful historical tidbits around, around something you would see in that episode. But Andrew Davies, the screenwriter, said over and over, a million times, as he needed to in the interviews before and during, when they were producing, this is not the musical. We're going back to the novel. This is going to be richer and deeper, and it's not the musical. There's no music. We don't like musicals anyway. He was very antagonistic toward the musical. And then in the info, they connected the songs. They'd say, well, if for this episode, these are the songs that you would hear if you watch the musical, which was nice. But it was interesting that even though they and other actors and people interviewed kept saying it's not a musical, it's not the musical, but the musical is so powerful. This, I think, is the bottom line. Schoenberg and Boublil's musical is so powerful that today you can hardly do this story without some kind of allusion to it for the general public. Yes, so there was some of that too in the U.S. This is not good because it doesn't have the music. But then the people on the other hand saying, I don't like musicals. This was brilliant. It was really good. What I wish they had done differently was to I perceive that they set up Valjean and Javert as a personal enmity and as a sort of a tracking, that Javert was tracking Valjean from the very beginning, which is not true in the novel. And so we lost that. I felt like we really lost the law versus justice versus moral right in the BBC's production. But there was brilliant in it in many aspects, and brilliant in its portrayal of the period and showing how really miserable life was then, which is harder to get, I think, from sometimes from a stage musical where you have the whole theater thing.
Yeah, and I think they only had 4 episodes, and that wasn't really enough. It wasn't long enough to do the story justice, and I think that's why Andrew Davies did some strange things with it. So although there were things about it, I didn't know why he did some of the things he did.
Me
but
too.
I suppose you'll always find that.
You will always find that. Yes, I think you'll always find that. I mean, a screenwriter is a writer. I mean, this is my understanding. This is how I come to figure out what's going on. A screenwriter is a writer, and writers have their ideas, and they want to tell their story. And he did some rather amazing things. He pulled out of the novel things that I haven't seen in other movies and did them very well. And explained some things that would either be dropped out of other movies or confusing because they were just touched on. In the BBC production, they were much more detailed and made sense. But other things I thought were confusing, even if you hadn't read the novel, they didn't make sense, I thought. But yes, I think you're right. I think it's just inevitable. And if you want to read the novel's there. So
yeah,
people who want to read the novel, it's there, and it is a page turner. I find it to be a page turner. There are a few chapters that, and I think I've put up on my website. If I haven't, I need to finish this. But there's a long chapter which made all kinds of sense to Hugo's readers, but makes no sense to non-French readers and modern readers, about Louis Philippe's the culture and times of Louis Philippe. And yes, Hugo's doing more in that section than just recounting history, but there are so many details, it's so hard to wade through that I'm not sure that most non-historian readers can benefit from reading that, whereas I think they can from reading the Waterloo section. but if you can skip through the parts that are just too detailed and historically detailed, the book just catches you up, I think. That's what my students say. Couldn't put it down.
Yeah.
This has been a really rich conversation. I've really enjoyed it. This is why I write books. It's not the sitting at the computer part. Lillian, hi.
I just want to say goodbye, and I left this in the chat, but I'm so happy for you and for your readers that you're bringing Victor Hugo to such depth for us right now at this time, because I think we really need it. And I wish it lots of success and lots of attention, because we need this right now. We need to mull through and go over all the themes that Victor Hugo is bringing to light, and it's no different today, this very day, and what we're going through, not with just the pandemic, but what the unrest we have, and the feelings of unforgiveness and anger and guilt, and just let's hope we make things right the right way, and in a humane way, that we show our love for one another. And I think that's your book it'll be great for that. People will read it, and we'll all activate our consciences.
I think yours is already activated, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do. It's hard to get a book known during a pandemic. It's the normal routes of letting people know about it. So any word of mouth, anybody that you think might like it, you can just mention it to I'm Not You, Lillian, you all. I would be much appreciated. And I'm just thrilled to hear that people say, and you say, Lillian, that you find it relevant to today, because it seemed to me so, but when you're sitting there for years writing by yourself, and my students, if I hadn't had my students, I don't think I could have done it, because they kept me going, and they were seeing relevance, and they wrote some amazing op-eds in a couple of different courses about what is relevant, and they saw relevant things that were relevant. I posted some of them on my website because they're so good. Well, actually, Emily posted them on my website. Emily, who's still with us, when she was my assistant, she posted them because I couldn't do it. And so, yes, I'm just delighted to hear that people are seeing the same kind of relevance that I'm seeing, and that I was so excited when I found Brian Stevenson and Nelson Mandela, and I didn't talk about because I didn't want to talk forever. But in the Is Change Possible chapter, the man that inspired me is Shaka Sangor, who wrote a book called Writing, W-R-I-T-I-N-G, Writing My Wrongs. And I actually have friends in France who, when they read To Love Is to Act, they got to that chapter and they put it in order for Shaka Songhor's book. He's talking. It's about redemption. He was injured in a drug thing, and then he killed somebody in a drug thing. He was in prison, and his book is riveting. And there are parallels with his experience and John's experience. It just makes me realize yet again what insights great writers have into human nature and humanity and the world, and that they can tell stories that bring to life what is out there right around us that we might not be noticing in a nonfiction kind of way. John unmuted himself. Yay.
I unmuted myself just to say thank you guys for coming. I'm happy so many people showed up, although I couldn't see any of you and still can't. So I know you're out there in the ether sphere somewhere, and I hope the power of the book and the originals come through to you. So love you guys. Bye.
Thanks for coming. Bye. Bye. You
I
want
don't know
to?
I don't know how to mute myself back now.
Oh, I'll mute you back.
Okay.
I have the power.
I just want to say thank you so much. It's such a joy as always to learn from you. And I've had the joy of doing that for 7 years now. So
I learned from you, Emily. It's mutual, totally mutual.
And,
Thank you so much for coming and being so supportive.
of course, of course. And I just echo what everyone said already about how vital it is to be thinking about these things right now and checking in with their own conscious. And yeah, I really hope that everyone continues to learn from you and from Victor Hugo, and that change is possible.
Yeah, change is possible. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for sticking around.
Of course.